can we do? What do I mean by that? If you are listening to my voice, you have made the decision to click, press, or dedicate time to tune into this episode. We could say you made a series of decisions that led you to this very point of you sharing in this discussion. The words that often come to mind when discussing the ability to make choices: free will. But what is free will? How does it work as it has been described in the past? This is Sit Down and Listen. First, it's important to point out that there are different views of what free will means and what it's made up of. The first view can be described as the humanist view of a free will, which in many aspects is the most popular view of this matter that we find within our culture. For this perspective, free will is defined as our ability to make choices spontaneously, meaning that our choices are in no way conditioned or determined by any prior prejudice, inclination, or disposition. So nothing prior to the choice determines what we do. No prejudice, inclination, or disposition. The choice comes on its own. Now, for example, if we look at this from a Christian perspective, we might find some things that are problematic with this definition of free will. First, there is a moral problem, and secondly, a rational problem. If our choices are purely spontaneous, in a way, what we're saying is that there is no real motive or reason for the choice. So that leads us to the question, how can our actions have any moral significance to them at all? In the Bible, we find a deep concern with the choices we make. But the concern is not only based on what we choose, but on what our inclination was, on what our intention was in making the choice. A classical example of this is the story of Joseph, son of Jacob, being sold into slavery by his own brothers. And towards the end of the account, Joseph finds himself with the brothers that betrayed him, and his brothers are sorry and they beg for forgiveness, but the words of Joseph, the words that he utters, show the real purpose behind all of the drama. He forgives their wrongdoings and accepts them by saying, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." So according to this scripture, God made a choice in the issue. God chose to allow these events to occur to Joseph. The brothers of Joseph also made a choice about what to do. Their inclination in the making of the choice was evil. But when put next to the inclination of God, that being altogether righteous and good, it's curious to me that God not only considers the outward action, but what else does he consider? He considers the inner motivation, the intent. But if there are no inner motivations, if there is no real intentionality, then how can the action have any moral significance whatsoever? It just happens. But putting that perspective aside, we find another issue. The question of whether or not a choice like this can actually be made. No. Just the moral implication. Not just that, but can a creature that has no prior inclination or reason make a choice? If I have no motivation to make any choice, that would mean that my will is neutral. It does not have any particular direction it wants to take. It doesn't have a cause it wants to fulfill. The question of evil and good is stuck in this middle ground. In the story of Alice in Wonderland, Alice is met with a decision to make. As she is traveling through, she finds that the main path that she has taken breaks off into several paths that she can take. She looks up and there's a Cheshire cat in the tree with a weird smile, and she asks the Cheshire cat, "Which road should I take?" And the Cheshire cat responds to the question by saying, "That depends. Where are you going?" Alice responds, "I don't know," which leads to the obvious response, "Then I guess it doesn't matter." If there is no intent, if there is no plan, if there is no desire to get anywhere, then why are you so worried about the decision making? What difference does it make? Many will look at this situation and say, well, Alice, has two choices. She can decide to go left or she can decide to go right. But I would argue that she has four choices. She can go to the left, she can go to the right, she can turn back from where she came from, or she can stay right there and not make a decision at all. So now I ask why she should choose any of these. If her will has actually been neutral to what should happen to her, why should she make any decision at all? The problem we have with the humanistic view is that it is something that comes out of nothing. It's a logical contradiction, an effect without a particular cause. And this is a very crucial truth. A spontaneous choice is an impossibility. From a biblical perspective, man in his fallenness is not in a state of neutrality. When it comes to God, he does have an inclination. He does have a bias, having an inclination toward what is wicked and what is away from God. There have been and there are many Christian thinkers that have different views on free will and about the freedom of the will. And that was the title of a very detailed work by one of the most important American theologians and philosophers of the 18th century, Jonathan Edwards. Martin Luther, one of the main faces of the Protestant Reformation, wrote The Bondage of the Will, a very good work on this issue. But Edwards had his own definition about what it meant to have free will. He said, freedom or free will is the mind choosing. Now, what he is saying, even though he differentiates between the mind and the will, to Edwards, they are so related that they cannot be torn apart. You don't make moral choices without your mind approving them. The will isn't something that acts independent from the mind, but it acts alongside it. Whatever your mind sees as being desirable is what the will is inclined to choose. Now, along with these concepts, Edwards gives us a solid rule, and I think it offers a lot to the debate about human freedom. Edwards says this, that free moral agents, meaning us humans, always act according to the strongest inclination they have at the moment of choice. Another way of saying this is, we always choose according to our strongest desire, and we also choose our strongest desire at the given moment. Anytime you act selfishly, what that action is indicating is that at the moment of your selfish behavior, you desire to be selfish. Your desire to be selfish is greater in that moment than your desire to share what you have. If you desire to share and be given, that desire was greater than your desire to be selfish, and that's what you'll follow, because it would be your strongest inclination. Now, while we talk about us choosing and making decisions, the truth is many times we choose things for no apparent reason whatsoever. If I ask you the question, why have you decided to listen to this discussion at the exact moment you decided to listen to it? Could you analyze your own thought process and response to the choices you had? Do you have a clear reason why you did it? Some might say, the reason why I'm listening now is because at 4 in the afternoon, I've separated time after finishing with other tasks to lay down on my couch and listen. Or maybe you're on Fridays driving back home from work, you take advantage that the traffic is oftentimes so tedious and you decide to catch up on the available episodes. The point is that there is a reason why you are doing what you are doing in a particular space and time. It could have been a quick decision, but sometimes, very oftentimes, the decisions we make have a deeper significance. Some people, when you take them to the park and they spot an empty bench, when deciding where to sit 10 times out of 10, they choose to sit at the end of the bench rather than the middle of the bench, either the left end or the right end. But other individuals will choose the middle of the bench. And why is that? Some people enjoy to be right in the middle of the action. They enjoy social environments. They have more extroverted personalities. Others prefer to be more isolated and have a quick exit always available. The truth is, we don't live our lives analyzing why we do what we do, but there is a reason. Now, some may bring objections to this law expressed by Edwards. Many can say, I have lots of occasions where the things that I did want to do, I really didn't want to do. For example, when outside forces are influencing me. This doesn't mean we don't get to decide. But again, it only means that our options have been reduced. The gunman comes to me and puts a gun to my head saying, give me your wallet or I'll kill you. He has reduced my options to 2. But if the options are my life or my money in his pocket, my strongest inclination becomes to live and to lose my money rather than lose both. Something that we should also be aware of, and this is critical, human desires fluctuate, meaning that they are at a constant rate of change. And in situations where we are making choices, we are barely choosing between 2 options. The second objection to this thought of Edwards is taken from the words of the Apostle Paul in his letter to the Romans. He says this, "For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing." And this can be kind of giving the impression that Paul, in all of his authority, is telling us that it is possible for a person to choose against his wishes, to choose against his desires. In response, I would say that Paul is addressing something that we all go through, not necessarily the complexity of human choice, but those who have desire within themselves to please Christ, but that desire always win out. When the moment comes and the possibility to make a choice that will negatively impact you and the people around you, I ask you, how often do you catch yourself? Is it most of the time that you value the pleasure and the benefit you will gain from a particular action more than the displeasure you can cause in others? John Calvin, the French theologian, said this. He said, "If we mean by free will that fallen man has the ability to choose what he wants, then of course fallen man has free will. But if we mean that fallen man has the moral power and ability to choose what is good and righteous, then Calvin said, free will is far too good of a term to apply to fallen man." What we are saying is that if our choices are a result of our dispositions and of our desires, and if actions are an effect that are not spontaneous but have causes and always have had reasons behind them, then what I want determines my personal choice. So how can I be free? So not only could we choose our desires, but we always choose according to our strongest inclination. And isn't that the central point of what free choice is? Now, for the sinner, the problem is not that the ability to make a choice has been lost. Sinners can still think, sinners still have wills. So what's the problem? The problem has been, is, and always will be in the desires of the heart in fallen man. Because there is an evil inclination, a desire to sin. What is our strongest inclination today? When we look at the world around us, what is the inclination that is dominating our society? Could this be a perfect mirror that allows us to see our weak point? The psalmist knew this problem when he wrote this. He said, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." We all have freedom, but to what extent is that freedom the one we fully desire?